How Much Land Does a Man Need? By Leo Tolstoy. Everything was as the merchant had described. The Bashkirs lived in felt-covered wagons called kibitki, in the steppe near a river. They didn't cultivate fields or eat bread, but they herded cattle and horses. The foals were tied up near the wagons, and the maras were milked twice a day to make kumis. The Bashkirs were hospitable and lived joyfully, enjoying tea, kumis, and sheep's meat while playing the flute. They were a dark-skinned people who didn't speak Russian. When they saw Pakhom, they greeted him warmly, brought him to the best kibitka, and treated him to tea, kumis, and mutton. Pakhom sent for his gifts and distributed them to the Bashkirs, who were delighted. They spoke among themselves and asked the interpreter to convey their message to Pakhom. "They want me to tell you," said the interpreter, "that they like you and it's their custom to grant the desires of their guests and exchange gifts. You have given them gifts, so now tell us what you desire from us, and we will give it to you." Pakhom replied, "What I desire most is your land. We have a shortage of land where I come from, but here you have plenty of good land. I have never seen anything like it before." The interpreter conveyed Pakhom's message, and the Bashkirs chatted among themselves, visibly amused and laughing. Eventually, they grew quiet and looked at Pakhom, and the interpreter spoke again. "They want me to tell you," he said, "that as a gesture of gratitude for your kindness, they are willing to give you as much land as you want. Just point to the land you like, and it will be yours." They continued conversing amongst themselves, and a dispute arose. Pakhom asked the interpreter what they were arguing about. The interpreter replied, "Some say you should ask the chief about the land because nothing can be done without him, while others believe it can be done without him." The Bashkirs continued arguing until a man wearing a fox-skin cap approached. Instantly, everyone fell silent and stood up. "That's the chief," said the interpreter. Pakhom quickly brought out his finest robe and gave it to the chief, along with 5 pounds of tea. The chief accepted the gifts and took a seat in the place of honor. The Bashkirs began telling him all about Pakhom, and he listened attentively, occasionally smiling. Then he started speaking in Russian. "Very well," he said, "take whatever you deem best. There's plenty of land to go around." Pakhom thought to himself, "I can take as much land as I want. But I need to ensure it's secure. Today they may say it's mine, but tomorrow, they could take it back. I appreciate your kind words," he said aloud. "You indeed have a vast amount of land, and I don't need much. However, I would like to know precisely what will be mine. We need to measure it accurately and establish my rightful ownership. Life and death are in God's hands. You, who are giving it to me, are good people, but your descendants may take it away." The chief smiled. "Perhaps," he said, "we will make it more certain, firmer than firm." Pakhom spoke again, "I have heard from a merchant who used to be here that you gave him a significant amount of land and made an agreement with him. Do the same with me." The chief understood perfectly. "Exactly," he replied, "we have a scribe here, and we'll go to town to have the agreement signed and sealed." "And the price?" Pakhom inquired. "We have only one price here, 1,000 rubles per day." Pakhom didn't comprehend. A day, he thought, what kind of measurement is that? How many acres does that represent? He asked aloud. "We can't determine that precisely," replied the chief. "We sell by the day, meaning you'll receive as much land as you can encircle in a day. The price per day is 1,000 rubles. Pakhom was astonished. "But wait," he said, "a great deal of land can be covered in a day." The chief smiled. "Yes, and it will all be yours. However, there's one condition. If you don't return to the starting point within the day, you forfeit your money and receive nothing." "But how?" Pakhom asked again. "Are you saying you'll measure all the land I cover?" "We will stay at the starting point while you make your rounds," explained the chief. Afterward, our young men on horseback will follow you, planting poles wherever you instruct them and plowing a furrow from pole to pole. You're free to choose your own path, but you must return to the starting point before sunset. Whatever you encompass within that time will be yours. Packham agreed, and they planned to set off early the next morning. They continued chatting, drinking more kummesh and tea as the night wore on. Eventually, they prepared a comfortable bed for Packham with soft cushions, and the Bashkirs departed. They promised to gather again at dawn, go to the starting point before sunrise, and begin the endeavor. Packham lay on his cushions, unable to sleep, consumed by thoughts of the vast land he was about to acquire. Here, he thought, I am truly fortunate. I'm on the verge of gaining a massive estate. In a single day, I can cover a distance of 50 miles effortlessly. And with the days being at their longest now, that's even more land. Within 50 miles, there must be at least 10,000 acres. I'll be independent from the rest of the world. I'll acquire 2 pairs of oxen and hire 2 laborers. I'll plow the areas I like the most and use the rest for grazing cattle. Packham remained awake throughout the entire night, his mind fixated on the land. Just before dawn, he finally drifted off to sleep and had a dream. In his dream, he found himself lying in the same kibitka, hearing someone laughing outside. An intense desire compelled him to discover the source of the laughter, so he stepped out of the kibitka. To his surprise, he saw the same Bashkir chief sitting by the kibitka, clutching his sides and laughing uproariously. Packham approached him and asked, "What are you laughing at so much?" However, he realized that it wasn't the Bashkir chief, but the merchant who had recently stayed with him and spoken about the land. Perplexed, Packham inquired, "How long have you been here?" But then he noticed that it wasn't the merchant either, but the peasant from the Volga who had informed him about the new settlement. He looked again and discovered that it wasn't the peasant at all, but the devil himself, complete with horns and hooves, sitting and laughing, fixated on something. Packham wondered, what is he looking at, and why is he laughing like that? In the dream, he cautiously approached, peeked, and saw a man lying there, wearing only a shirt and trousers. The man's feet were bare, and he lay motionless, his face as pale as a towel. As Packham examined the man more closely, he realized that it was himself. Filled with horror, Packham let out a scream and woke up. Startled, his initial thought was how nonsensical dreams could be. He surveyed his surroundings and noticed that the sky was growing gray. It was the break of dawn. I need to wake up the others, he thought, the time has come. Packham rose from his cushions and woke up his laborer in the tarantass. He instructed him to harness the horses while he went to wake up the Bashkirs. It's time, he said. We need to go to the steppe and take our measurements. The Bashkirs got up, gathered together, and soon the chief joined them. They started drinking kummesh again, and they wanted Packham to drink tea, but he refused. If we're going, let's go, he said impatiently. So the Bashkirs set off, some on horseback and some in tarantasses, while Packham and his laborer rode in their own tarantass. By the time they reached the steppe, the red dawn was already visible. They arrived at a small mound, dismounted, and the Bashkirs gathered on top of it. The chief approached Packham and pointed with his hand. Look, he said. As far as your eyes can see, it's all ours. Choose what you want. Packham's eyes gleamed with excitement. The entire land was covered in lush grass. It was flat as the palm of a hand, black as poppy seeds, with ravines marked by patches of bushes in various colors. The chief took off his fox-skin cap and placed it on top of the mound. This will be the goal, he said. Put your money in it. Your labor will stand here. This is your starting point, and here you'll return. Whatever you encircle will be yours. Packham took out his money, placed it in the cap, removed his kaftan, since his doublet was enough clothing, tightened his belt, put a piece of bread in his pocket. attached a gourd filled with water to his waist, tightened the straps of his boots, and prepared to leave. He pondered which direction to take first since the land was all good. It doesn't matter, he thought. I'll go toward the west. He faced the dawn, impatiently waiting for the sun to rise above the horizon. Then he reconsidered, thinking, what's the use of wasting so much time? I won't wait any longer. It will be easier to travel in the cool of the morning. The mounted Bashkirs appeared on the top of the mound, standing behind Pakhom. As soon as the sun appeared, Pakhom turned around and descended into the steppe, followed by the horsemen. Pakhom set off at a steady pace. After covering a mile, he ordered them to plant a pole. He continued further, his limbs losing their initial stiffness. He quickened his pace. After another 5 miles, he had them plant another pole. Pakhom glanced back at the sun, and the mound with the group standing on it was clearly visible. He estimated that he had traveled 5 miles. Now he began to sweat. He removed his doublet and tightened his belt further. He pushed on, covering another 5 miles. It was getting hot. He looked back at the sun, it was already breakfast time. I've completed 1 wagon stage, he thought. 4 wagon stages make a good day's journey. It's still too early to turn back, but I can at least loosen my boots. He sat down, made his boots more comfortable, and continued on. The going became easier. He thought, I'll go another 5 miles, and then I'll turn left. This spot looks good. However, the farther he went, the better the land became. He kept going straight. Eventually, he looked back and saw that the mound was barely visible, and the people on it looked like black ants. Well, thought Pakhom, I've gone far enough in this direction. I should turn now. He was feeling very hot and had a strong desire to drink. So he raised his gourd to his mouth and drank, without stopping. They planted another pole in the ground, and he abruptly turned left. He continued on and on, the grass grew stiff and tall, and the heat became oppressive. Pakhom stopped and looked at the sun, it was already lunchtime. Well, thought Pakhom, I suppose I should rest. He stopped and ate some bread but refused to sit down. He thought, if I start sitting down, I'll want to lie down, and if I lie down, I'll fall asleep. So he stood still for a short while to catch his breath and then continued. At first, it was easier to walk. The food had given him strength. But soon the heat grew intense, and the sun beat down on him. Pakhom began to feel extremely tired. Come on, he thought, endure for an hour, and then you'll live like a king forever. He pressed on and covered 10 miles in that direction as well. He was about to turn left again when he noticed a very good spot, a fresh, well-watered ravine. He couldn't resist the temptation to include it in his land. That ravine would be perfect for growing flax, he thought. So he continued straight, encircling the ravine. Another pole was planted, and he turned for the second corner. Pakhom looked toward the mound. The people on it were just visible. It was exactly 15 miles away. Well, he thought, the first 2 sides of my land are quite long. This side should be shorter. He traversed the third side, taking longer strides than before. He checked the position of the sun again. It had already started to descend. On the third side, he had only gone 2 miles in total, and he was still 15 miles away from the goal. Well, he thought, even if my property ends up uneven, I must keep going straight now. Anything more would be too much for me. I have enough land at last. So Pakhom adjusted his course and walked straight toward the mound. Pakhom pressed on determinedly towards the mound, but the going was incredibly difficult. He stumbled repeatedly, his legs aching and swelling, threatening to give out beneath him. Resting was no longer an option if he wanted to reach his goal before sunset. The sun seemed impatient, not sinking gradually but plummeting as if pulled down forcefully. Doubt crept into Pakhom's mind. Had he made a mistake? Did he choose too much? What if he didn't arrive in time? Fatigue overwhelmed him, and the thought of all his effort going to waste haunted him. He knew he had to push harder. Summoning all his strength, Packham broke into a trot, disregarding the pain and the bloodied legs. He discarded his vest, shoes, water gourd, and even his hat, driven by the fear of losing everything if he didn't reach the goal in time. His body drenched in sweat, his mouth parched, he felt his heart pounding like a hammer, and his feet no longer felt like his own. Thoughts of his land vanished, all he could think about was the fear of collapsing from exhaustion. But he couldn't bring himself to stop. The distance he had covered urged him on. The Bashkir's shouts and encouragements fueled his determination. Packham mustered every ounce of remaining strength and, at last, the sun dipped below the horizon. Yet, he was within reach of his goal. People on the mound waved their hands, motivating him further. He spotted the fox skin cap on the ground, filled with money, and saw the chief sitting there, clutching his sides in laughter. Packham remembered his dream. The land is abundant, he thought, but will God allow me to live on it? Alas! I have lost myself, he realized. Nevertheless, he kept running. Glancing back at the sinking, large red sun, Packham groaned as he felt he had lost everything. But then a thought struck him: though he couldn't see the sun from his vantage point, it would still be visible from the top of the mound. Determined, Packham dashed towards the mound, scaling it in a gallop. There it was, the fox skin cap, lying on the ground. Yet, as he stumbled and fell, reaching out desperately for the cap, he breathed his last breath. The chief of the Bashkirs cheered, recognizing Packham's victory in acquiring the vast land. Packham's laborer rushed to him, intending to lift him up, but upon seeing blood flowing from his mouth, he realized the tragic outcome. The laborer groaned, while the chief sat, squatting and laughing heartily. Eventually, the Bashkir chief rose, collected the money from the ground, and ordered the laborer, "Come. Dig." The Bashkirs followed suit and departed, leaving the laborer alone with Packham's lifeless body. With solemn determination, the laborer dug a grave for Packham, measuring it precisely 3 Russian ells in length, matching Packham's exact height from head to foot. Packham's insatiable greed and ambition to acquire more and more land ultimately led to his demise. The irony is that in the end, the only plot of land he truly needed was the grave that was dug to bury him. The story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked materialism and the importance of moderation and contentment.